The Dead Sea Scrolls are the most important archaeological discovery of the 20th century.
They were never meant to be read by us. For nearly 2,000 years, the Dead Sea Scrolls lay hidden in silence, sealed in caves, guarded by time, war, and fear. Scholars called them holy. Historians called them incomplete. But now, artificial intelligence has done what human minds could not. It connected the fragments, patterns, and symbols we overlooked, and exposed something deeply unsettling. Because the scrolls were not just religious texts, they were warnings. AI analysis revealed hidden authors, erased timelines, and encoded messages that suggest history itself was edited intentionally. Certain prophecies were altered, certain truths were buried. And the most disturbing part? The scrolls describe events unfolding right now. What was once dismissed as myth now reads like a suppressed report about humanity's future and its control. If this truth reaches the wrong hands, it disappears again. So hit like, subscribe, and stay connected, because what you're about to hear was buried once, and they don't want it uncovered twice. The descent into the Cave of Horror. Explained simply, in 2021, a team of archaeologists made a dangerous journey into one of the most haunting places in the Judean desert. They weren't looking for treasure or artifacts to display in a museum. They were searching for fragments of truth, pieces of history that had been missing for decades. To reach the cave, the researchers had to rappel straight down an 80-meter cliff. It was exhausting, risky, and unforgiving. One wrong move could mean serious injury. But for Oren Abelman and his team from the Israel Antiquities Authority, the danger was worth it. Deep inside the cave, hidden beneath layers of dust and silence, were tiny remains of something extraordinary, fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls. These weren't complete scrolls or dramatic discoveries at first glance. They were fragile scraps, small, brittle pieces of ancient parchment. But as Abelman explained, even the smallest fragments can speak volumes when they're placed together correctly. Slowly, like assembling a broken puzzle, the team began restoring bits of lost text, allowing faint words and meanings to surface again. The cave itself has a chilling reputation. Officially called Cave 8, it is far more commonly known as the Cave of Horror. That name comes from what earlier explorers discovered there in the 1950s and 60s. Skeletons, dozens of them. During the Bar Kokhba revolt, around 135 CE, nearly 40 Jewish men, women, and children fled into this cave to escape Roman forces. The Romans surrounded the cliff above, cutting off all exits. The people inside refused to surrender. Trapped with no water or escape, they died where they hid. Their remains stayed there for centuries, untouched. Now those same caves are yielding new scroll fragments, and this time, scholars aren't alone. With the help of artificial intelligence, researchers are beginning to analyze these texts in ways never possible before. And what AI is uncovering may reshape everything we thought we knew. Let me show you how. The scrolls that survived, explained simply. After decades of exploration, most experts believed the Cave of Horror had already given up all its secrets. The idea that anything new could still be hiding there seemed unlikely. But history has a way of rewarding patience and attention to the smallest details. More than 60 years after the cave was first explored by professors Yigael Yadin and Yohanan Aharoni, a new team returned with modern equipment and a fresh perspective. The cave's environment worked both for and against them. Its dry, isolated conditions helped preserve ancient materials, but the darkness, dust, and cramped space made discoveries incredibly easy to miss. At first, what the team found looked like nothing, just dusty fragments scattered among the rocks. But one archaeobotanist noticed faint marks on a few tiny pieces. Under closer examination, those marks turned out to be traces of ink, letters, words. The fragments were part of an ancient scroll, hidden in plain sight for nearly 2,000 years. In most climates, parchment like this would have completely disintegrated long ago. But the desert protected it. Heat, dryness, and isolation froze time just enough for these fragile pieces to survive. That small discovery reignited excitement among researchers because it meant the cave still had stories left to tell. The Dead Sea Scrolls themselves were first discovered in the 1940s, mainly near Qumran. Many scholars believe they were written by a Jewish group known as the Essenes, though this remains debated. What made the scrolls so important wasn't just their age, it was their content. They included the oldest known copies of biblical texts, along with writings that had vanished from history. These documents revealed intense debates about faith, law, and identity in ancient Jewish life. They also offered rare insight into the world that eventually shaped early Christianity. But now, something new has entered the story. Artificial intelligence is analyzing these fragments beyond human limits, and what it's beginning to uncover may change everything. Stay with me. This mystery is only getting deeper. The child, the basket, and the scrolls. Explained simply, as archaeologists continued exploring the cave, it became clear that this place held more than ancient texts. Layer by layer, the cave revealed traces of real human lives, intimate, emotional, and deeply moving. Near the entrance, just beneath two carefully placed stones, the team made a heartbreaking discovery. They found the mummified remains of a child, estimated to be between 6 and 12 years old. The body had been gently placed in a fetal position. Its head and upper body were wrapped in cloth, while the feet were left uncovered. In the child's hands was another piece of fabric, held as if for comfort. This was not a careless burial. Everything about it suggested intention and care. Later tests showed the remains were around 6,000 years old. What made the discovery even more striking was how well preserved the body was. The cave's dry air, combined with the way the child had been wrapped and placed, kept time from destroying it. For researchers, it felt like a quiet message sent across thousands of years, a reminder that these were real people, not just artifacts. Deeper inside the cave, another extraordinary object emerged, a large woven basket. Unlike most ancient finds, this one was nearly perfect. Strong, tightly woven, and clearly built for long-term storage, it could hold about 100 liters. Scientific analysis dated it to nearly 9,000 years ago, making it the oldest basket ever discovered. According to Oren Abelman, this basket opened a window into a critical moment in human history. It came from a time before pottery existed, during the pre-pottery Neolithic B period. People were beginning to settle in one place, grow food, and build early villages instead of constantly moving. The basket wasn't just a container, it symbolized a changing way of life. Together with the child and the scrolls, the cave offered something rare, a deeply human story of survival, care, and transformation across ages. Echoes of the prophets. Explained simply, not everything from the past survives in perfect condition. Sometimes history reaches us in fragments, faded, torn, and incomplete, yet still filled with meaning. That's exactly what archaeologists encountered with the scroll pieces recovered from the cave. In total, about 80 small fragments of parchment were found. On their own, they looked insignificant. But when researchers carefully examined and fitted some of them together, a clearer picture began to emerge. These pieces were identified as part of the Scroll of the 12, also known as the Minor Prophets Scroll, a collection of writings that includes 12 prophetic books. This wasn't the first time parts of this scroll had surfaced. Similar fragments were discovered back in the early 1950s, when Bedouins exploring the Nahal Hava area found pieces and later sold them in Jerusalem. What made the new discovery special was how well it connected to those earlier finds, helping scholars fill in missing gaps. One detail immediately stood out: the language. Instead of Hebrew or Aramaic, the scroll was written in Greek. According to Oren Abelman, this is rare for biblical texts found in the Judean desert. Even more interesting, the writing came from two different scribes, each with a slightly distinct style. The text also didn't exactly match the Septuagint, the well-known Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. Instead, it appears to be a modified or localized version. This suggests that ancient communities didn't just copy scripture word for word. They interpreted and adapted it to fit their traditions. From the fragments, researchers were able to reconstruct about 11 lines of text. Some came from the Book of Nahum, describing divine judgment and overwhelming power. Others quoted Zechariah, emphasizing honesty, justice, and rebuilding after exile. Though small, these fragments are priceless. They show how sacred texts evolved, moved across cultures, and were passed down, carefully, deliberately, and human hand by human hand. Digital eyes on ancient ink. Explained simply. When archaeologists pulled the scroll fragments from the Cave of Horror, they quickly realized they were dealing with something incredibly fragile. These weren't neat pages or readable passages. Most of the pieces were tiny, some no bigger than a fingernail. Time had crushed them, darkened them, and weakened them after nearly 2,000 years buried in dust and stone. To the naked eye, many looked like nothing more than scraps of dirt-stained parchment. The challenge was clear. How do you study something this delicate without destroying it? Traditional methods, physical handling, close inspection, even basic photography, risked causing more damage. So the researchers turned to something radically different: artificial intelligence, not to decode secrets or hunt for hidden prophecies, but simply to see what human eyes could no longer see. The process began with advanced imaging. Each fragment was scanned using multiple types of light: visible, infrared, and ultraviolet. Under these conditions, faint traces of ink began to appear, marks completely invisible in normal light. Lines, curves, and partial letters slowly emerged, as if the text was being pulled back from the edge of disappearance. Next came specialized software, similar to optical character recognition, or OCR, but far more advanced. This system wasn't trained on modern fonts. It had learned to recognize ancient Greek and early Hebrew writing styles. Stroke by stroke, letter by letter, the AI began reconstructing characters that had almost faded into nothing. But reading the letters was only the first step. Once everything was digitized, researchers fed the data into a deep learning system trained on thousands of ancient manuscripts. This AI didn't just read words, it noticed patterns. It compared handwriting styles, parchment textures, ink composition, and layout structures across different fragments. And that's when something unexpected happened. The AI began grouping fragments together, identifying which pieces likely came from the same scroll or even the same workshop. Similar handwriting, stitching techniques, and materials suggested organized scribal centers where texts were carefully copied and preserved. Even in isolated desert regions, these communities were methodical and intentional. What once seemed random now revealed order. But the biggest surprise came when researchers realized the AI was seeing something deeply human. As the scans became more detailed, paleographers noticed that the software wasn't just identifying letters, it was detecting movement. Tiny variations in strokes hinted at pressure, speed, and hesitation. Just like modern handwriting analysis, these ancient marks carried emotion. Think about how you can sometimes tell if someone is tired, rushed, or anxious just by looking at their handwriting. The same idea applied here. The angle of a line, the uneven flow of ink, a slight tremble in a curve, all of it told a story about the person holding the pen. One fragment stood out in particular, a passage from the book of Nahum. At first glance, it looked messy. Letters were jagged, ink thinned unexpectedly. Some strokes leaned forward, while others drooped. Human observers might have dismissed it as sloppy work. But the AI saw something else. It detected micro-tremors in the strokes, tiny, involuntary movements suggesting the writer's hand wasn't steady. That raised powerful questions. Was the scribe elderly, sick, injured, or were they writing in fear, under pressure, perhaps hiding or rushing as danger closed in? Suddenly, the scroll was no longer just a religious text. It became a frozen moment of survival. A person, centuries ago, trying to preserve sacred words while their world may have been collapsing around them. We may never know who that scribe was, but their trembling hand, the pressure of their fingers, the urgency in their movements, all of it survived. And thanks to modern technology, we can finally see not just what they wrote, but how they felt while writing it. The scrolls didn't just carry words, they carried people. Tracing the scrolls explained simply. Just when researchers thought the scroll fragments had told their full story, artificial intelligence uncovered something deeper, something that stretched across distance, language, and time. For years, many scholars believed the Dead Sea Scrolls were the work of a single group, often linked to the Essenes living near Qumran. It was a tidy explanation. But once AI entered the picture, that certainty began to unravel. Using advanced tools, researchers started examining details too subtle for the human eye. Tiny differences in ink chemistry, the texture of parchment, stitching techniques, and handwriting styles. What emerged was far more complex than anyone expected. The scrolls weren't written in just one language. They appeared in Biblical Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and even Paleo-Hebrew, a script often reserved for sacred names. That alone wasn't shocking. What raised eyebrows was where these scrolls were found. Fragments turned up not only near Qumran, but also in distant places like Wadi Murabba'at and the Cave of Horror. These weren't neighboring sites. They were spread across harsh desert terrain. This raised an uncomfortable question. If one isolated group wrote these texts, how did they end up scattered so widely? AI-driven analysis started connecting dots humans had missed. Despite being found far apart, many scrolls shared striking similarities in how they were prepared and copied. At the same time, there were signs of urgency, corrected lines, rushed stitching, re-inked letters. It looked less like calm scholarship and more like emergency preservation. That shifted the entire narrative. Instead of one secluded community, evidence began pointing toward multiple groups working together. Some fragments matched writing styles from Jerusalem and Galilee rather than Qumran. Certain versions of texts found in the Cave of Horror didn't exist at Qumran at all. They aligned with other Jewish communities living under Roman pressure. So why the rush? Many scholars now believe these scrolls were being protected during a time of collapse. After the destruction of the Second Temple, chaos spread. Cities fell. People fled. Sacred texts were at risk of being burned, stolen, or erased. In response, scrolls were passed hand to hand, carried through deserts, hidden in caves, and sometimes buried alongside the dead. Picture it: scribes copying by lamplight, runners slipping past Roman patrols, families sealing sacred writings beneath stone. This wasn't random hiding. It was organized resistance against forgetting. And today, AI is finally uncovering the system behind it. By comparing handwriting quirks, ink mixtures, and parchment techniques, machines confirmed something powerful. This was a coordinated effort. A network, forgotten by history, had worked deliberately to keep these texts alive. And now, piece by piece, that network is being revealed. The lost lines of the scrolls. As AI analysis deepened, another unsettling pattern emerged. The fragments weren't just damaged by time. Some absences felt intentional. Certain well-known biblical books were missing entirely. The Book of Esther, central to Jewish tradition, was nowhere to be found. Chronicles, essential for tracking kings and priestly lineages, was also absent. These weren't minor omissions. Were these texts lost or deliberately excluded? The Greek fragments raised even more questions. Some verses didn't match the traditional Septuagint at all. They referenced unfamiliar events and figures. Others shifted the tone of Scripture, from divine command to group agreement. Some texts emphasized community rituals over centralized worship, hinting at deep internal disagreements. Then came the most striking discovery. Passages tied to messianic hope were softened or removed altogether. In their place were warnings about moral decay, shared responsibility, and survival in dark times. It felt less like prophecy and more like preparation. AI helped make sense of it. These weren't copying mistakes. The changes were consistent and intentional. Different handwriting styles overlapped. Ink formulas changed mid-text. Language rhythms shifted, as if different voices were arguing across the page. What emerged was not one belief system, but many. Some groups clung to tradition. Others adapted it. Some waited for salvation. Others focused on endurance. The scrolls became living documents, reshaped by people trying to respond to a world falling apart. In that light, the Dead Sea Scrolls stop feeling distant and quiet. They become urgent, human. They read less like ancient scripture and more like evidence of people rewriting meaning in real time, line by line, while history closed in around them. The scrolls that challenge scripture. Explained simply, as researchers dug deeper into the Dead Sea Scrolls, one truth became impossible to ignore. This was not a single, clean collection of religious writings. It wasn't one voice speaking clearly through time. Instead, it was a chorus, many voices shaped by fear, conflict, hope, and survival. The scrolls revealed something unsettling, but important. Sacred scripture didn't arrive fully formed. It evolved. At the time these scrolls were written, there was no such thing as the Bible as we know it today. There was no fixed table of contents, no agreed-upon canon. So when scribes copied texts, they weren't preserving a finalized book. They were preserving ideas still being debated, edited, and reinterpreted. What scholars found challenges a long-held assumption that scripture was passed down untouched, perfectly preserved across generations. The scrolls show something far more human. Politics mattered, fear mattered, historical chaos mattered. Some edits weren't small or accidental. Entire commandments were reworded. Historical events were rearranged. In some texts, authority shifted from divine command to group agreement, as if decisions were being made collectively, not dictated from above. When artificial intelligence compared thousands of fragments to other ancient versions, like the Septuagint, the Masoretic text, and the Samaritan Pentateuch, the cracks became clearer. Entire books people expect to see today were missing. Esther was nowhere to be found. Chronicles was absent. These weren't obscure texts. They mattered deeply in later tradition. So why protect sacred writings at great risk and leave those out? The Greek fragments raised even more questions. At first, they seemed familiar, but closer analysis revealed passages never seen before. Some introduced unknown figures or strange events. Others softened commandments, shifting focus away from centralized temple worship and toward community practices. The tone changed too. Instead of strong, messianic expectations, some texts emphasized shared responsibility, moral decline, or apocalyptic warning. This raises a difficult question. Were these communities rewriting religion to fit their reality? Or were they responding to a world already collapsing around them? Some scrolls described creation not as peaceful order, but as conflict between cosmic forces, an idea that feels foreign to modern faith traditions. Yet there it was, written into the margins of ancient belief. These weren't errors, they were choices. Taken together, the Dead Sea Scrolls don't represent one religious archive. They represent centuries of disagreement, adaptation, and survival. Power shifted, ideas clashed, texts were edited, expanded, or abandoned depending on who held the pen. The sacred wasn't missing, it was moving. Secrets of the sacred texts. For decades, many scholars hoped the Dead Sea Scrolls would simply confirm the modern Bible. Instead, they revealed something more complicated and more honest. Scripture wasn't born perfect. It was shaped over time, sometimes slowly, sometimes under pressure, but always by human hands. Some scrolls lacked commandments found elsewhere. Others rearranged major events. Some left out key figures entirely. These weren't isolated mistakes. They pointed to intentional decisions made across generations. That leads to the biggest question of all. Who decided what stayed and what disappeared? If sacred texts were edited, who had the authority to do it? Was it prophets, priests, survivors, political leaders? This isn't just an academic question. It cuts to the foundation of belief systems, followed by millions. Many traditions teach that Scripture was handed down unchanged. But what if survival mattered more than perfection? What if power, fear, and preservation shaped the canon more than anyone wants to admit? For some, this realization feels uncomfortable. For others, it makes faith more real. Because when the layers are peeled back, what remains isn't a flawless book. It's a record of struggle, of people trying to protect meaning while their world fell apart. The Dead Sea Scrolls don't weaken belief. They deepen it. They show that faith, like language, is never frozen. It grows, fractures, adapts, and rebuilds. And in that process, it becomes more alive, not less. If you've enjoyed this journey so far, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.